My name is Evelyn, and I am 27 years old. Growing up in a middle class Wisconsin home, I always knew something wasn't quite right about how my parents viewed family obligations. My younger brother, Jake, now 19, was always the academic star with a bright future ahead. Then came that unbelievable phone call from my parents that changed everything. They actually threatened to force Jake to drop out of college unless I started paying them back for raising me. Yes, you heard that correctly. They wanted reimbursement for my childhood. I would love to know where you are watching from today. If my story resonates with you, please hit subscribe and like to follow how I stood up to this manipulation and protected my brother's future. I grew up in a quiet suburb of Milwaukee in what appeared to be a normal middle class family. Our house was comfortable, we always had food on the table, and from the outside, everything looked perfect. My parents, Richard and Diana, were masters at maintaining this facade of normalcy to friends, neighbors, and extended family. Dad worked as an accountant at a respectable firm, while Mom was a part-time administrative assistant who primarily focused on maintaining the household, as she liked to phrase it. But inside our home, the atmosphere was entirely different. From my earliest memories, there was always an unspoken ledger being maintained. If I received new school clothes, I would hear about how expensive they were for weeks afterward. When Jake needed braces, my parents made sure he understood the financial burden he was placing on the family. Every Christmas and birthday gift came with a subtle reminder of the sacrifice it represented. My father, with his accounting background, seemed to approach parenting like it was a balance sheet. He would casually mention the cost of dance lessons or school supplies, as if he was logging them into some invisible family expense report. "Do you know how many hours I had to work to pay for those soccer cleats?" became a common refrain. At the time, I thought this was normal parenting, just teaching us the value of money. My mother was more subtle but equally effective with her emotional manipulation. She specialized in sighs and martyred expressions, often saying things like, "I gave up my career for you kids," or "I haven't bought new clothes for myself in years so you could have that school trip." These comments were always delivered in a tone that made it clear we should feel guilty for the sacrifices she had made. Jake, 4 years younger than me, was always the family star. He showed exceptional academic ability from an early age, bringing home perfect report cards and winning school competitions. My parents beamed with pride at his accomplishments, seeing them as a reflection of their excellent parenting. I was a good student too, consistently earning B's with occasional A's, but my achievements never seemed to generate the same enthusiasm. Despite their obvious favoritism toward Jake, my parents' love always came with conditions for both of us. They would praise Jake's academic success, but remind him of how much they had invested in his education. "We pay for the best schools so you can reach your potential," they would say, making it clear that his achievements were partially theirs by financial proxy. I started working part-time at 16 initially at a local ice cream shop, and then at a retail store at the mall. It wasn't that we needed the money particularly. Our family was financially secure. But I craved the independence that came with earning my own income. Having money that didn't come with emotional strings attached felt liberating. I could buy a coffee without a commentary on frivolous spending, or purchase a book without justifying its educational value. When I graduated high school and was accepted to the state university, I made a conscious decision to become financially independent. I took out student loans, worked multiple jobs, and did everything possible to avoid asking my parents for money. This wasn't easy, especially watching classmates receive parental support without the emotional toll that would have come with it in my case. I worked as a campus tour guide, a library assistant, and even picked up weekend shifts at a catering company. Many nights I would be studying until 2 a.m. after finishing a late shift. During those college years, I limited my visits home to major holidays and a few weekends per semester. Each visit seemed to reset the emotional toll to zero with my parents, acting as though my independence was a personal affront rather than a natural progression. "You're too busy for family now," my mother would say, while my father would make pointed comments about the real world waiting after graduation. Throughout this time, I maintained a close relationship with Jake. We texted regularly, and I made sure to attend his important school events whenever possible. I wanted him to know that he had at least one family member whose support came without conditions. As he entered his high school years, I noticed my parents ramping up the pressure on him, talking constantly about prestigious universities and career paths before he had even taken the SAT. After graduation, I landed a marketing job in Chicago, about 2 hours from my hometown. The distance felt like both a physical and emotional buffer. I found an apartment with a college friend, established myself professionally, and began building a life that wasn't defined by my family dynamics. Jake, meanwhile, was thriving academically. By his senior year, he had become valedictorian and secured a substantial scholarship to an excellent university known for its science programs. My parents were ecstatic about Jake's accomplishments and the scholarship. They threw him a lavish graduation party, inviting extended family and neighbors to celebrate. I came home for the weekend and watched as they basked in the reflected glory of his success. "We always knew he was special," my mother told anyone who would listen. "We made sure he had every opportunity," my father added, as if Jake's hard work had been a minor factor in the equation. What none of us knew then was that my parents had been counting on that scholarship money in ways that would soon upend all our lives. It was a Tuesday evening in late September when Jake called me, bubbling with excitement about his first few weeks of college. He had joined a study group for his advanced chemistry class, met interesting people from all over the country, and was thrilled about a research opportunity one of his professors had mentioned. I could hear the newfound independence in his voice, that same sense of freedom I had felt when I first left home. "The campus is incredible, Evelyn," he said, "and my roommate Mark is pretty cool too. His family lives about an hour away, and they invited me for dinner this weekend. It feels so normal here, like I can just focus on learning without everything being so complicated." I knew exactly what he meant by complicated. It was our code for the emotional minefields we navigated at home. Hearing the happiness in his voice made me feel like at least one of us had made a clean break. Just 1 week later, my phone lit up with my father's name. It was unusual for him to call rather than having my mother make the check-in calls, so I answered with a slight feeling of unease. "Evelyn," he began without preamble, his voice carrying that formal tone he used for serious discussions. "Your mother and I have been looking at our finances, and we need to discuss something important with you." My first thought was that one of them had health issues or they were having financial problems. I was already mentally calculating what I could afford to help with from my entry-level salary when he continued. "Now that you've been out of college for a few years and established in your career, it's time for you to start repaying your debt to us." I was confused. "Debt, Dad? I didn't borrow money from you for college. I worked and took out student loans. I'm still paying those off." There was a short, uncomfortable laugh on the other end. "Not those expenses, Evelyn. I'm talking about everything before that. Your upbringing, the cost of raising you." My mind went blank with shock. I actually pulled the phone away and stared at it for a moment before responding. "You want me to pay you back for raising me? That's that's not a thing, Dad. Parents choose to have children. That's not a loan." "Don't be naive," he replied sharply. "Children have always been expected to care for their parents. We invested in you for 18 years. Food, clothing, housing, extracurriculars, family vacations. It all adds up. I've prepared a spreadsheet detailing the expenses. I'll email it to you after this call." I heard my mother's voice in the background, and then she was on the line too. "Evelyn, honey, this is about family obligation. We sacrificed so much for you and Jake. Now it's time for you to show your gratitude in a meaningful way." My head was spinning. "Mom, I appreciate everything you both did, but this isn't normal. Parents don't invoice their children for raising them." "This isn't about normal," my father cut in. "This is about responsibility. And speaking of responsibility, there's something else you should know. If you're not willing to fulfill your obligations to this family, we'll need to reassess our support for Jake's education." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean Jake has a scholarship?" "The scholarship covers tuition, not living expenses," he explained with an edge of satisfaction in his voice, as if he was playing a winning hand in a card game. "Books, housing, meal plan, transportation. Those costs add up quickly. If we're not receiving any return on our investment in you, we'll need to redirect those funds elsewhere." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Are you seriously threatening to pull financial support from Jake unless I pay you for raising me? He just started college." My mother jumped in her voice, taking on that wounded tone I knew so well. We're not threatening anything, Evelyn. We're just being practical. Family resources need to be allocated responsibly. If you're not contributing to the family, we'll have to make difficult decisions. It suddenly clicked. You were counting on Jake's scholarship money for yourselves, weren't you? You thought his tuition would be covered so you could use the money you'd saved for his college for something else. The silence that followed confirmed my suspicion. Finally, my father spoke. We've supported both of you your entire lives. Now it's time for you to support us. Jake's situation is unfortunate, but actions have consequences. I was speechless. They were using Jake as leverage, placing his education and future in jeopardy to extort money from me. It was a new low even for them. I'll need time to think about this, I managed to say, my voice shaking. Don't take too long, my father replied. We need an answer within a week. I'm sending the spreadsheet now. Review it carefully. We expect the first payment by the end of the month. After the call ended, I sat in stunned silence in my apartment. Minutes later, my email notification chimed. My father had indeed sent a spreadsheet meticulously categorized with 18 years of supposed expenses, from prenatal care to my high school graduation party. Each item had been assigned a dollar value with an interest rate applied based on years elapsed. The final figure at the bottom made me feel physically ill. For the first time, I saw with perfect clarity the transactional nature of what I had always sensed, but couldn't articulate about my relationship with my parents. In their eyes, I had never been a daughter to love unconditionally. I had been an investment, and now they expected returns. And they were willing to sacrifice Jake's future to get them. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the coldness in the spreadsheet my father had sent. 18 years of my life reduced to line items and dollar amounts, the birthday parties, school supplies, medical expenses. Even the family dog had partially been assigned to my column of the ledger, since I had been the one to beg for a pet. I kept replaying childhood memories, now seeing them through this new lens. The Christmas I received a bicycle and was reminded about its cost throughout the following year. The time I had strep throat, and my mother made multiple comments about having to miss work to take me to the doctor. Even my high school graduation gifts had come with reminders of how fortunate I was to have such generous parents. By morning, exhaustion had given way to a cold anger. I pulled up my bank accounts and loan statements, calculating my financial situation. As a relatively recent college graduate with entry-level income in an expensive city, I was already stretching my budget. Between student loan payments, rent, and basic living expenses, I had very little savings. The amount my father was demanding would require me to either take on significant additional debt or work multiple jobs, just as I had during college. During my lunch break the next day, I did some research on filial responsibility laws. While some states do have laws requiring adult children to support their parents in certain circumstances, Wisconsin wasn't one of them. And even in states with such laws, they typically applied only when parents were indigent or required care, not when financially stable parents simply decided their children owed them reimbursement. That evening, I called my friend Amanda, the only person I knew who might understand. Her mother had similar tendencies, though not quite as extreme. They sent you an actual spreadsheet, she asked, incredulous, after I explained the situation. With interest applied. That's beyond toxic, Evelyn. That's financial abuse. The worst part is using Jake as leverage, I said. He's just getting started at university. This could derail his entire future. Have you talked to Jake about this? Amanda asked. Not yet. I don't want to stress him out when he's just settling into college, but I think I'll need to soon. After speaking with Amanda, I made an emergency appointment with my therapist, whom I'd been seeing occasionally since college to deal with anxiety. Dr. Winters listened carefully as I explained the situation. What you're describing is a form of emotional blackmail, she said when I finished. They're using your love for your brother as leverage to control your behavior and extract money from you. This isn't about financial need. It's about control. So what do I do? I asked, fighting back tears. If I refuse, they'll punish Jake. If I give in, this will never end. Before you make any decisions, I think you should talk to Jake, she advised. He's legally an adult now. He deserves to know what's happening, especially since it directly affects his future. You might find he has insights or options you haven't considered. The next day, I texted Jake casually asking how classes were going. His response was enthusiastic but brief. I noticed he didn't mention anything about problems with money or our parents, which gave me a slight hope that perhaps they hadn't yet said anything to him about their threats. I decided to probe gently. How are things going with the practical stuff, meal plan working out? Any unexpected expenses? His reply took longer this time. It's fine. Budgeting is tight, but manageable. Something in his short response raised my concerns. This wasn't like Jake, who usually shared details freely with me. I tried again. That's good. Mom and Dad helping with the extras. This time the delay was even longer. Finally, they check in about money stuff a lot. Dad has access to my bank account to help manage things. Kind of annoying, but whatever. My stomach dropped. They had financial control over him, just as they had tried to maintain with me. I needed to know more, but text wasn't going to be sufficient for this conversation. Any chance you're free for a phone call tonight? Just want to catch up properly. We spoke that evening, and after some casual conversation, I gently steered toward financial topics. That's when the floodgates opened. They made me set up a joint account before I left for college, Jake explained. Dad deposits my monthly allowance, but then he questions every purchase. Last week he called asking why I spent $12 at a coffee shop when I could make coffee in my dorm. He made me calculate how much I'd spend in a year if I bought coffee twice a week. This was a familiar pattern, the illusion of support coupled with constant surveillance and criticism. Has Dad said anything about their financial situation recently? I asked carefully. Any mentions of having to tighten belts or unexpected expenses? Jake hesitated. He did say something weird last time we talked. Something about family resources being stretched and how everyone needs to contribute. Then Mom got on the phone and started saying how they might have to make sacrifices they hadn't planned on. I didn't really understand what they meant. They were already laying the groundwork. I felt sick. Jake, I need to tell you something, and it's going to be upsetting, but I think you need to know. I took a deep breath and explained about our parents' demand for repayment and their threat to withdraw his financial support. There was silence on the other end of the line for so long that I thought we might have lost the connection. Jake, are you there? They're using me as leverage against you. His voice was small and hurt, and they're willing to mess up my education over this. I'm so sorry. I didn't want to upset you, but I thought you should know what's happening. No, I'm glad you told me, he said, his voice strengthening with anger. This explains why Dad's been asking weird questions about whether my scholarship could cover dorm costs if necessary. He called it exploring all options. We talked for over an hour, sharing similar experiences of manipulation we'd each endured. Jake revealed that our parents had convinced him to turn down a slightly smaller scholarship at his dream school to accept the larger one at his current university, framing it as his responsibility to the family finances. By the end of our conversation, I had made a decision. I need to see you in person. We need to figure this out together. I can drive up to campus this weekend. What do you think? Yes, please, he said, sounding relieved. I need to see a face from home that doesn't come with strings attached. As I hung up, I began researching the cost of living for a college student in Jake City, housing, food, books, transportation, all the expenses our parents were supposedly covering. I also looked into whether his scholarship had any flexibility, or if the university offered additional financial aid options. The numbers were daunting, but not impossible. Between my salary and Jake potentially taking a part-time job, we might be able to make it work. It would be tight, and I'd have to put my own financial goals on hold, but the alternative was unacceptable. I couldn't let my brother's future be collateral damage in my parents' twisted game. That night, I faced a moral dilemma that kept me awake until dawn. Paying my parents felt fundamentally wrong. It would validate their warped view of parenthood as a business transaction, and likely encourage more demands in the future. But refusing meant Jake would suffer consequences he didn't deserve for a conflict he hadn't created. As the sun rose, I realized there might be a third option. It wouldn't be easy, but it would allow both Jake and me to break free from the cycle of manipulation that had defined our family for too long. 5 days after my parents' initial call, I finally called them back. I had prepared extensively, writing out talking points and practicing maintaining a calm, reasonable tone regardless of what they might say. "I've reviewed your spreadsheet," I began after they both got on the line, "and I've given this a lot of thought." "Good," my father responded. "So you understand the situation. We can set up a payment plan that works with your budget. We're not unreasonable, Evelyn." "Actually, I'm calling to let you know that I won't be paying you back for raising me," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Having children was your choice, and providing for them was your legal and moral obligation. There was never an agreement that those costs would be repaid." There was a moment of stunned silence before my father's voice came back colder than before. "I see. So all our sacrifices meant nothing to you. This is how you show gratitude." "I am grateful for the good things you provided," I clarified, "but gratitude doesn't mean I owe you financially. And using Jake's education as leverage is wrong." My mother jumped in, her voice already trembling with emotion. "How can you say such things after everything we've done for you? We gave you a wonderful childhood. We supported you through school, and now when we need something in return, you just turn your back on us." "This isn't about supporting you in need," I pointed out. "You're both employed with savings in a paid-off home. This is about demanding repayment for doing what parents are supposed to do." "Don't lecture us about parenting," my father snapped. "You have no idea what it takes to raise children. The costs, the sacrifices. If you saw children primarily as costs and sacrifices, that's part of the problem," I replied. My mother began crying loudly in the background. "I can't believe you would hurt us this way. After all we've done." My father's voice turned threatening. "Fine. If that's your decision, we'll have to make some difficult decisions of our own. Jake will need to understand that family resources have limits." "Have you already told Jake about this situation?" I asked, though I knew the answer. "We've explained to him that the family is facing some financial reconsiderations," my father said vaguely. "That sacrifices might be necessary. He needs to understand financial reality." "So you've already started preparing him for the idea that he might have to leave college," I translated, "using his education as a bargaining chip." "Don't put words in my mouth," my father snapped. "We're simply reassessing our financial priorities since you've made your priorities clear." After ending the call, I immediately phoned Jake. His voice was tight with stress when he answered. "Mom just called me crying," he said without preamble. "She said they might have to pull me out of school after this semester because of family financial issues. Dad got on and started talking about me maybe taking a temporary break to work and save money." "Evelyn, what's happening? Is this because of what you told them?" "I'm so sorry, Jake. Yes, I refused to pay their demand, and now they're following through on their threat." My hands were shaking with a mixture of anger and anxiety. "But I'm not going to let them ruin your education. We're going to figure this out." I rearranged my work schedule to take Friday off and drove the 3 hours to Jake's campus that afternoon. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop near his dorm, away from his roommate and the possibility of interruptions. When I saw Jake sitting at a corner table, I was struck by how young and vulnerable he looked. For all his academic brilliance, he was still just 19, trying to navigate his first taste of independence while being yanked back by invisible strings. Over the next 2 hours, I laid everything out for him. The complete contents of my parents' demand, the spreadsheet, the threats, and the manipulative tactics they'd been using our entire lives. Jake listened intently, occasionally, nodding in recognition of patterns he'd experienced too. "I always thought it was normal," he said quietly. "The way they tracked everything made us feel guilty about what they spent on us. I thought all parents did that." "I did too, until I saw how my friends' families operated. Not everyone keeps score like this, Jake." As we continued talking, Jake revealed more about how our parents had been financially controlling him since he started college. They had insisted on complete access to his bank accounts, questioned every purchase, and required him to send photos of receipts for anything over $20. They had also forbidden him from getting a part-time job, claiming it would interfere with his studies, but effectively ensuring he remained dependent on them. "They keep saying they're protecting me," Jake said, frustration evident in his voice. "But it feels more like they're controlling me." "That's exactly what they're doing," I confirmed. And now they're using that control to get to me through you. As we were discussing options, my phone rang. It was our parents. I showed Jake the screen. Should I answer it? I asked. Put it on speaker, he suggested. I want to hear directly. I answered and immediately informed them they were on speakerphone, with both Jake and me. You went to Jake's school, my mother asked, sounding betrayed. Without telling us, I'm having a coffee with my brother, I replied calmly. That shouldn't be a problem. You had no right to involve him in adult financial discussions, my father interjected angrily. He's just starting college. He doesn't need this kind of stress. Jake spoke up, surprising both me and our parents. If you're threatening my education, I think I have a right to know, Dad. No one is threatening anything, my mother said quickly. We're just facing some financial realities because your sister has decided she has no obligation to her family. Stop manipulating him, I said firmly. Jake is smart enough to see what you're doing. My father's voice hardened. Jake, we need to discuss your living arrangements for next semester. We've been looking at options, and we think it might be best if you come home and attend community college for a while. Jake's face paled, but his voice remained steady. That would mean losing my scholarship. I can't just take a break and come back later. Sometimes we have to make sacrifices for family, my mother added, her martyred tone in full effect. I watched Jake's expression shift from shock to hurt to something harder and more resolved. In that moment, I knew what I needed to do. Jake doesn't need to lose his scholarship or leave school, I said firmly. If you're withdrawing financial support, he can come live with me in Chicago. He can commute to campus or transfer to a university there. There was stunned silence on the other end of the line. Clearly, they hadn't anticipated this option. That's ridiculous, my father finally sputtered. Jake needs to focus on his studies, not dealing with a commute or transfer. It's better than dropping out, Jake said quietly. You're not dropping out, my mother insisted. Just taking a break until things stabilize. Which would mean losing my scholarship permanently, Jake pointed out. I think Evelyn's offer makes more sense if you're really not able to support me anymore. The conversation devolved from there, with our parents alternating between guilt trips, threats, and attempts to drive a wedge between Jake and me. But the more they pushed, the more clearly Jake seemed to see the manipulation for what it was. After we hung up, Jake looked at me with tears in his eyes. Did you mean it about me coming to live with you? Absolutely, I assured him, though my mind was already racing through the logistical challenges. My apartment is small, but we can make it work until we figure something out better. For the first time that day, Jake smiled. I can sleep on a couch. I don't care. I just don't want to go back home. Not now that I see what they're doing. As we hugged goodbye, promising to talk more that evening about practical details, I felt a mixture of dread and determination. I had just made a huge commitment that would stretch my finances and change my life significantly. But watching the relief on my brother's face, I knew it was the right choice. Some things were worth sacrificing for, not because of obligation or coercion, but because of love. That weekend became a blur of urgent activity. After our coffee shop conversation, Jake and I went directly to his dorm room to assess what he would need to bring immediately versus what could wait. His roommate Mark walked in while we were making lists. "Whoa, are you moving out?" Mark asked, looking concerned. "Everything okay?" Jake hesitated, clearly uncomfortable sharing the full situation. I jumped in with a simplified version. Family financial situation changed suddenly. Jake might need to stay with me in Chicago for a while. Mark's response surprised us both. "Man, that sucks. But hey, I can help you pack if you need. And if you leave some stuff, I promise I won't let anyone mess with it." This small kindness from a relative stranger brought tears to Jake's eyes, which he quickly blinked away. "Thanks, that would be great, actually." With Mark's help, we packed Jake's essential belongings, clothes, laptop textbooks, and personal items, fitting everything into my compact car. We left his mini fridge desk lamp and some winter clothes, with promises to figure out retrieval later. The 3-hour drive back to Chicago was tense. My phone kept lighting up with texts and calls from our parents, which we both ignored. Jake stared out the window occasionally, wiping away silent tears. "I keep thinking I must be overreacting," he said finally. "Maybe they really are in financial trouble and I'm being selfish." "That's the conditioning talking," I told him gently. They've trained us to doubt ourselves and feel guilty when we don't comply with their demands. But think about it logically. Nothing about their financial situation changed except their decision to demand payment from me. He nodded slowly. And even if they were in real trouble, threatening my education isn't the solution. There are other options they could have explored. Exactly. This was about control, not necessity. By the time we reached my one-bedroom apartment in Chicago, it was late evening. The reality of our new arrangement became immediately apparent as I cleared space in my living room. My sofa wasn't a pullout, so we had to improvise with an air mattress I borrowed from Amanda. "I'm sorry it's so cramped," I said, as we squeezed the inflated mattress between my coffee table and TV stand. Jake shook his head firmly. "Don't apologize, you're saving me. This is already better than going back home." That night, after Jake had fallen into an exhausted sleep, I sat at my small kitchen table looking at my budget. The addition of another person would stretch my finances significantly. I'd need to account for additional food utilities, potentially helping with his transportation to campus, or transfer costs if he switched universities. The numbers were daunting, but I was determined to make it work. The next morning, Jake had an emotional breakdown over breakfast. "This is all my fault," he sobbed. "If I had just chosen a cheaper school or lived at home and commuted, none of this would be happening." I moved to sit beside him, putting my arm around his shoulders. "Listen to me. This is not your fault. You earned that scholarship through hard work. You deserve to be at that university. What's happening now is entirely about Mom and Dad's unhealthy attitudes about family and money. But now you're stuck with me. Your whole life is disrupted because of me." "I'm not stuck with you. You're my brother, and I love you. Yes, this is a challenge, but we'll figure it out together." And honestly, breaking this cycle of manipulation is probably the healthiest thing for both of us in the long run. As the day progressed, the barrage of messages from our parents intensified. They alternated between fury, "How dare you take your brother without discussing it with us," manipulation, "Your father hasn't been able to sleep, he's so worried about Jake," and outright threats, "We could report this as kidnapping." "They can't actually claim kidnapping, right?" Jake asked anxiously as I showed him the latest message. "I'm 19. "No, they can't. You're a legal adult who made a choice to come with me. They're just trying to scare us." By evening, our parents had moved on to involving extended family members. My phone lit up with texts from aunts, uncles, and even our grandmother, all asking what was going on and why we were abandoning the family. "They're really spinning this, aren't they?" Jake observed as I read him the latest message from our Aunt Carol, claiming our mother was beside herself with grief over our betrayal. Classic triangulation. I sighed. Instead of dealing directly with us, they're recruiting others to apply pressure. Surprisingly, it was our mother's sister, Aunt Susan, who broke the pattern. Her message was brief but meaningful. "Something seems off about your parents' story. Would like to hear your side when you're ready. No pressure. Love you both." This small show of support from an unexpected source brought tears to my eyes. At least someone in the family was willing to consider there might be another perspective. The next few days were a crash course in practical challenges. Jake needed to open new bank accounts that our parents couldn't access. I helped him transfer his meager savings and set up direct deposit for the campus job he planned to apply for. We met with his university's financial aid office to discuss his changed circumstances, discovering that as an independent student, he might qualify for additional assistance. Jake also needed to figure out his academic situation. The commute from Chicago to his current campus wasn't feasible long-term, so he began researching transfer options to universities in Chicago. The timing was tricky. Mid-semester transfers were complicated, but he found several programs that might work for the following term. Throughout all this, our parents continued their campaign. The most shocking moment came 3 days after Jake moved in when the building security called up to my apartment. "Ms. Hamilton, there's a couple here claiming to be your parents. They're quite insistent about coming up." My heart raced. "Did you let them in the building?" "No, ma'am. Our policy requires resident permission for visitors." "Thank you. Please tell them I won't be coming down and they don't have permission to enter the building." Jake was pale with anxiety. "They came all the way to Chicago. That's a 2-hour drive." "It's another control tactic," I explained, though my own hands were shaking. They thought showing up in person would make it harder for us to maintain boundaries. According to the security guard's later report, our parents remained in the lobby for nearly an hour, alternating between demanding to be let up and trying to convince him of the family emergency that necessitated seeing us. Finally, my father delivered what he clearly thought was his trump card. Tell Evelyn she has a choice. Either bring Jake down here now or consider herself no longer part of this family. When the guard relayed this message, Jake and I exchanged a long look. "What do you want to do?" I asked him. He squared his shoulders. "I think we already made our choice when we drove to Chicago, and it was the right one." I nodded, then asked the guard to inform my parents that we wouldn't be coming down, and they should leave before he called the police for trespassing. They left, but not before my mother loudly informed everyone in the lobby that her children had abandoned their loving parents, who had sacrificed everything for them. That night, Jake and I ordered pizza and sat on the floor of my living room, emotionally exhausted, but somehow lighter than we'd been in years. "Do you think they'll really disown us?" Jake asked quietly. I considered the question. They might say they have, but I think what they really want is to regain control. When they realize these tactics aren't working, they'll probably try a different approach. Like what? I'm not sure, but whatever it is, we'll face it together. Over the next few weeks, Jake and I established a new normal that was challenging but sustainable. We began apartment hunting for a two-bedroom place that would fit our limited budget, finding a few possibilities in neighborhoods with good public transportation to downtown and potential universities. Jake applied for and got a job at his university's library that allowed him to work remotely most of the time. The pay wasn't much, but it gave him some financial independence and workplace experience for his resume. More importantly, it helped him feel like he was contributing to our household, rather than being a burden. My company surprised me with their support when I explained the situation to my supervisor. I had been worried about needing to adjust my hours or occasionally work remotely to help Jake with his transition. Instead of resistance, my manager offered flexibility and even connected me with HR to discuss dependent care options. While Jake didn't technically qualify as my dependent, they found ways to accommodate our situation. "Family emergencies happen," my supervisor said. "The way you've stepped up for your brother shows exactly the kind of loyalty and problem solving we value here. We can make this work." As Thanksgiving approached, Jake and I faced our first major holiday away from our parents. The realization hit me one evening as I was making dinner. "We won't be going home for Thanksgiving," I said aloud, the thought both liberating and sad. Jake looked up from his textbook at the kitchen table. "I know. It's weird, right? Part of me feels guilty, but another part feels relieved." "I get that completely." I agreed. "Let's make our own Thanksgiving. Nothing fancy, just good food and no emotional manipulation for dessert." We invited Amanda and her boyfriend plus a couple of coworkers who weren't traveling home. We cooked a small turkey in my tiny oven, made simple sides, and created new traditions that were uniquely ours. There were moments of sadness, but mostly it felt like the beginning of something healthier. December brought new developments. I received a promotion at work that came with a modest but welcome salary increase, easing our financial pressure slightly. Jake excelled in his final exams, despite the upheaval in his personal life, and secured admission to transfer to a well-regarded university in Chicago for the spring semester. His scholarship wouldn't fully transfer, but the combination of financial aid, his part-time job, and my support made it feasible. Throughout this time, we continued to hear from our parents, though the nature of their communications evolved. After their initial fury and threats proved ineffective, they shifted to guilt and martyrdom. Social media became their platform of choice, with my mother posting vague but pointed updates about the pain of being abandoned by ungrateful children and the heartbreak of an empty home during the holidays. Friends from our hometown occasionally reached out confused by the narrative our parents were spinning. "Your mom keeps posting these sad things about you and Jake cutting them off." My high school friend Tara texted, "Is everything okay?" We decided to be selective about who we shared the full story with. For most people, we simply said there were complicated family dynamics we were working through. For close friends who asked directly, we gave a simplified version of events. The responses were overwhelmingly supportive, with many expressing shock, but not disbelief at our parents' behavior. Our extended family was more challenging to navigate. The flying monkeys our parents had initially dispatched continued their campaign, but we maintained firm boundaries. "We're not discussing our relationship with our parents through third parties," became our standard response. "If you'd like to maintain a relationship with us separately, we'd welcome that." And some relatives respected this boundary, others didn't. By Christmas, our contact list had been naturally pruned to those who could relate to us as individuals, rather than extensions of our parents. Christmas itself was another opportunity to create new traditions. We found an affordable two-bedroom apartment and signed the lease to begin January 1st, so we spent the holiday weekend packing my place and shopping for basic furniture for our new home. Instead of expensive gifts, we bought practical items. We'd need kitchen supplies, a desk for Jake's studies, lamps for the rooms that lacked overhead lighting. On Christmas Eve, we received an unexpected call from Aunt Susan. "I've been talking with your parents." She began, causing both our hearts to sink. But then she continued, "And I want you to know, I don't believe their version of events. Your mother mentioned something about Evelyn refusing to repay her childhood expenses, and that set off major alarm bells." This was the first family member who had seen through our parents' narrative. We shared more details, and Susan listened without judgment. "I always sensed something wasn't quite right with how your parents approached parenting," she admitted. "The constant tallying of expenses, the way they talked about their sacrifices. It wasn't healthy. What you're doing now is brave, even if it's difficult." Her support was a beautiful Christmas gift, a reminder that not everyone in our family operated by the same dysfunctional rulebook as our parents. As we settled into our new apartment in January, we began to feel the first real sense of stability since the crisis began. Jake's new university program suited him well, and living in the city eliminated the need for a difficult commute. I was thriving in my expanded role at work, and our apartment, though modest, felt truly like home in a way neither of us had experienced before. "It's weird," Jake commented one evening as we were making dinner together. "I don't feel like I'm walking on eggshells anymore. I didn't even realize how tense I was all the time until I wasn't." I knew exactly what he meant. The absence of constant emotional manipulation created space for genuine peace. We could disagree without fear of emotional punishment. We could make mistakes without expecting a ledger of failures to be pulled out and reviewed. We could simply be. Our parents eventually realized their public shaming campaign wasn't working. By spring, they attempted a new approach, sending carefully worded emails suggesting reconciliation and putting the past behind us. But their messages contained no acknowledgement of the harm they'd caused, no recognition of the inappropriate nature of their demands, and tellingly, no apology. "They want to reset without accountability," I observed to Jake after reading the latest message. "Go back to the status quo with us properly in our roles as obligated children." "What should we do?" he asked, his expression troubled. "I miss having parents, but I don't miss how they made us feel." It was a profound distinction that captured our dilemma perfectly. After careful consideration and consultation with our therapist, we had begun seeing someone together to work through our shared family trauma. We decided on very limited structured contact. We would respond to communications, but maintain firm boundaries about what we would and wouldn't discuss. We declined invitations to meet in person until there was evidence of genuine change. Our parents grudgingly accepted these terms, likely realizing it was the only access they would get. Over time, their communications became less manipulative, though we remained vigilant for subtle attempts to reassert control. As Jake's first full year of college concluded, we celebrated not only his academic success, but our successful navigation of this family crisis. Our apartment had become a true home, decorated with items that reflected our personalities, rather than our parents' preferences. We had established healthy routines and mutual support that strengthened our sibling bond without the toxic dynamics that had previously defined it. Most importantly, we had each begun to recognize and address the patterns of thought and behavior instilled by our upbringing. Jake decided to minor in psychology, fascinated by understanding family dynamics, and determined to break generational patterns. I found myself setting healthier boundaries in all relationships, recognizing red flags I might previously have ignored. The journey wasn't easy, and the wounds weren't fully healed. But with each passing month, we built something our parents had never truly provided a family, based on unconditional love and support, where care wasn't tracked on spreadsheets or used as leverage for control. It's been just over 1 year since that incredible phone call from my father, demanding payment for my childhood, and the subsequent ultimatum that changed our lives. As I look around our apartment, a real two-bedroom place that Jake and I have turned into a home, I can hardly believe how much has changed in 12 months. Jake has thrived at his new university in Chicago. After an initial adjustment period, he found his academic stride again, making the dean's list both semesters and securing a prestigious summer research internship in his field. He's grown so much, not just academically but personally. The nervous, self-doubting teenager who arrived with an air mattress and a duffel bag has blossomed into a confident young adult who knows his worth isn't determined by others' approval. My own life has transformed in ways I couldn't have predicted. The promotion I received last winter came with another small raise this year, giving us more financial breathing room. I've gained a reputation at work as someone who remains calm and solution-focused during crises, a skill honed through years of navigating family dysfunction and perfected during our abrupt life change. Perhaps the most surprising development has been in my personal life. 6 months ago, I met Daniel through a work project. After years of gravitating toward people pleasers who reminded me of my relationship with my parents, I found myself drawn to his straightforward communication style and healthy boundaries. When I eventually shared my family story with him, his response was validating without being pitying. "That explains why you're so resilient," he said, "and why you're so good at seeing through manipulation." Our relationship with our parents has evolved into something I describe as carefully managed contact. After months of attempting to regain control through various tactics, they eventually accepted that their old methods no longer worked with us. We now have periodic brief phone conversations that follow implicit rules: no discussion of money, no guilt trips about our decision to live independently, no undermining of Jake's educational choices. These interactions remain somewhat strained and superficial, but they're free from the toxicity that once characterized our family dynamics. It's not the warm, loving parent-child relationship I sometimes envy in friends, but it's a significant improvement over the emotional and financial manipulation we endured for years. The extended family situation has largely sorted itself out. Some relatives chose to believe our parents' narrative of abandonment and ungrateful children. Others, like Aunt Susan, saw through the facade and have maintained independent relationships with us. A few have reached out over time, curious about both sides of the story, often after witnessing inconsistencies in our parents' version of events. We've been selective about who we let back into our lives, prioritizing relationships that are genuinely supportive, rather than those based on obligation or shared DNA. This curated family circle, supplemented by close friends who've stood by us through this journey, provides the authentic connection we once thought could only come from our parents. Jake decided to major in computer science, with a psychology minor fascinated by the intersection of technology and human behavior. "I want to understand why people do what they do," he explained, "especially in families." I recognize this as part of his healing process, transforming painful experiences into knowledge that might help others. As for me, therapy has helped me recognize how deeply our parents' transactional view of relationships had shaped my own patterns. I'd been unconsciously measuring my worth by what I could provide to others, always feeling I needed to earn love through service or sacrifice. Learning to accept care without calculating how to repay it has been one of my greatest challenges and most healing revelations. The financial aspect of our situation has stabilized. While it's still not easy supporting a household in Chicago on my salary, with Jake contributing what he can from his part-time work, we've developed systems that work for us. We're transparent about money without being obsessive. We discuss expenses as practical matters rather than moral judgments or accumulated debts. Most importantly, we never use financial support as leverage against each other. One of the most profound lessons I've learned through this experience is about the true meaning of family. Family isn't defined by obligation genetics or financial ledgers. It's defined by love that doesn't keep score support, that doesn't come with strings attached, and relationships based on mutual respect rather than power dynamics. Breaking free from the cycle of manipulation wasn't easy. There were nights I lay awake wondering if I'd made the right choice, if the disruption to our lives was worth the freedom we'd gained. But watching Jake grow into himself without the constant weight of emotional debt has confirmed 1,000 times over that we made the right decision. I've also learned that standing up to emotional blackmail isn't selfish. It's sometimes the most loving thing you can do both for yourself and for the people being manipulated alongside you. By refusing to participate in the unhealthy system our parents had established, we created space for something healthier to grow. Our journey continues, of course. Healing isn't linear, and there are still days when the old conditioning resurfaces. Jake occasionally falls into patterns of trying to earn his keep when he feels he's not contributing enough to our household. I sometimes catch myself measuring my worth by productivity or service to others, but we recognize these moments now and gently help each other back to healthier perspectives. The bittersweet reality is that our relationship with our parents will likely never be what we once hoped for. The unconditional love and support that children deserve isn't something they seem capable of providing, but we've stopped waiting for them to become the parents we needed, and instead focused on creating the family we deserve, beginning with how we treat each other and extending to the people we choose to welcome into our lives. If there's one thing I hope readers take from our story, it's this: genuine love doesn't come with a price tag or an invoice. It doesn't demand repayment or keep detailed records of sacrifices made. Real love gives freely, supports unconditionally, and respects boundaries. Sometimes protecting the people you love means making difficult choices that others won't understand. But those choices can lead to freedom, healing, and the opportunity to break generational patterns of harm. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect yourself or someone you love from toxic family dynamics? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if our journey resonated with you, please subscribe and share this video to help others who might be facing similar situations. Thank you for listening, and remember, you deserve relationships that build you up rather than tear you down.